I gave them everything. My home, my love, my years. But the day she raised that mop against me, I realized I was nothing to them anymore. The morning sunlight used to be my favorite thing. It would pour into my kitchen, warm and golden, falling over the old wooden table where my late husband and I had once shared countless cups of tea. But that morning, the light felt harsh, like it was trying to expose something I wasn't ready to see. My daughter-in-law, Rachel, sat across from me. She was young, beautiful, and sharp-tongued. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently against a thick stack of papers in front of her. My son, Daniel, stood by the counter, his head low, eyes darting between us like a child caught between two storms. "Mother," Rachel began, her tone sweet but cold underneath. "This is just a formality. We need your signature on these documents to move the property under Daniel's name. You know how things are. Taxes, legal stuff, all very complicated." I looked at her, then at Daniel, my only child, the boy who used to hold my hand while crossing the street, the man who once promised to never let me be alone. "Why so suddenly?" I asked softly, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Rachel smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We just want to secure everything properly. For the family." For the family. How easily she used those words, as if she truly meant me too. I turned the first page. My name was printed in neat black letters, followed by legal jargon I could barely understand. But one line stood out clearly. Transfer of ownership. Residential property. All assets, liquid and fixed, amounting to $5 million. My heart skipped a beat. "This is everything I have," I whispered. "Yes," Rachel replied, "and it'll still be yours, in a way. You'll still live here, of course. Nothing will change." But something in her tone told me everything would change. I looked at Daniel. "Is this what you want too?" He didn't meet my eyes. "It's for convenience, Mom. You know Rachel takes care of everything now. It's just easier." Easier. That word stung. For decades, I had managed everything: bills, savings, house repairs, meals. Now I was apparently a burden in my own home. I slid the papers back toward her. "No," I said quietly. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" I said no, I won't sign this. Her polite mask cracked. "Mrs. Howard, you're not thinking clearly. We're trying to help." I cut her off. "I may be old, Rachel, but I'm not blind. These aren't just papers. You're asking me to give up the last piece of my life's work." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, please don't make this difficult." I smiled bitterly. "Difficult? I spent 40 years building this family's life, and now you want to erase my name from it. If that's difficult, then maybe it should be." The room fell silent. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. "Fine. Have it your way." She stood abruptly, gathering the papers with a sharp snap. Daniel sighed and followed her out of the kitchen. I sat alone, staring at the cold cup of tea in front of me, my hands trembling slightly. Outside, I could hear her voice raised in anger. "Your mother's being unreasonable. She's hoarding money that could secure our future." And then, quieter, but still audible through the thin walls, Daniel's voice, heavy with hesitation. "I'll talk to her again. Give me a week." A week? I didn't know then what that week would bring, or how much my world would crumble in those 7 days. That night, I sat by the window and looked at the stars. My husband used to say that the stars were memories, shining reminders of the people who loved us once. I whispered into the darkness, "John, I think I'm losing them. I think I've already lost them." The house, once warm with laughter and love, suddenly felt colder than it ever had before. And in the silence of that night, I began to understand something painful. Love can fade not because of distance, but because of greed. The next morning, the air inside the house felt different, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves were listening. Rachel didn't greet me when I came into the kitchen. She moved around briskly, her heels clicking against the tiles, the scent of her expensive perfume clashing with the familiar smell of my tea. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. "Good morning," I said softly. No one answered. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to sit or leave. This was still my home, my kitchen, my memories. Yet suddenly, I felt like an intruder. Finally, Rachel spoke, not looking at me. "We're going out later. Don't wait for us for dinner." Her voice was sharp, dismissive. The kind people use for a tenant, not a mother-in-law. "All right," I replied. I tried to sound calm, but my throat felt tight. They left soon after, laughter echoing faintly as the door shut behind them. I sat at the same table, hands folded, staring at the cup of tea growing cold again. The same as yesterday. The same as every day since my refusal. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that hums with unspoken things. I could almost feel the resentment floating in the air, thick and sour. For the next few days, Rachel barely spoke to me. When she did, it was short, clipped, and always with that artificial smile that said, "You're in my way." She began moving things around, the photos on the mantel, my old embroidered cushions, even the small vase John had given me on our 25th anniversary. "Just trying to make the place look modern," she said lightly when I noticed. "Too much clutter?" Clutter. That's what she called my memories. Daniel, on the other hand, avoided me altogether. When he came home, he'd head straight to their room. Sometimes I'd hear muffled arguments between him and Rachel, my name mentioned, followed by her angry tone. Then the silence again. On the 5th night, I made dinner for everyone, out of habit more than hope. Chicken stew, the way Daniel liked it as a boy. I set the table, arranged the bowls neatly, and waited. The clock ticked. The stew cooled. When they finally came home, Rachel wrinkled her nose. "You cooked? You really didn't have to." "I thought we could eat together," I said. She sighed, dropping her purse on the counter. "Daniel already ordered takeout. You know how tired we get." My eyes fell to the table. 3 bowls, steaming gently, waiting for a family that no longer wanted them. Rachel picked up the bowls one by one and scraped them into the trash. The sound, that wet thud, echoed in my chest. She turned back and smiled thinly. "Don't worry, Mrs. Howard. You can relax now. You've done enough cooking in your life." That night, I sat in my room and wept quietly, pressing my old handkerchief to my lips to keep the sound from escaping. I didn't want them to hear. Pride is a strange thing. Even when your heart is breaking, you still don't want your enemies to see you bleed. On the 6th day, Daniel finally came to talk. "Mom," he said, standing awkwardly by my door, "can we talk about the papers again?" I looked up from my knitting. "You mean the ones Rachel wants me to sign?" He nodded, guilt flickering in his eyes. "She's worried, Mom, about the future, about taxes, and about control," I finished for him. He sighed. "She just wants security. If something happens to you..." I smiled sadly. "Something already has, Daniel. You stopped being my son the day you let her talk to me like a stranger." He looked pained, but said nothing. After a moment, he turned and left. The click of the door closing sounded final, like the shutting of a chapter I wasn't ready to end. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the darkened house, touching the walls, the furniture, the fading photographs. Every corner held a piece of me, of my life. My wedding photo on the wall, Daniel's first drawing, still taped near the refrigerator, John's favorite chair by the fireplace. How could they see all this and still not understand? Money wasn't love. It never was. As I passed the kitchen, I noticed the papers again, lying on the counter, waiting like a patient enemy. Rachel had left them there, perhaps hoping I'd change my mind in the quiet of the night. I picked them up, ran my fingers over the signature line, and whispered, "Not yet, not ever." I placed them back and turned off the light. The next morning, everything would change. I didn't know it then, but Rachel had reached her limit. My refusal wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was a challenge. And she was about to remind me, cruelly, what happens when you defy her. It was raining that morning, the kind of soft, cold rain that makes everything smell like earth and memories. I stood by the window, watching the drops race each other down the glass, my reflection faint and tired beside them. I used to love the rain. John and I would sit together, sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing. But now, it just felt lonely. Rachel's voice broke through the quiet. "Mrs. Howard, can you come here for a second?" Mrs. Howard, not Mom, not even Mother. That was the moment I realized she had officially taken love out of my name. I walked slowly to the living room. Rachel stood near the cabinet, holding a small framed picture, my wedding photo. John was in his uniform, smiling proudly. I had flowers in my hair, my cheeks red from shyness. That photo had survived decades, moving houses, floods, even the playful chaos of Daniel's childhood. "What are you doing with that?" I asked. Rachel shrugged. "I'm redecorating. I think we should take down some of these old photos. They make the house look dated." I blinked. "That's my wedding picture." "I know," she said lightly, as if that made it less painful. "But it's just collecting dust. Maybe it's time for something new." Before I could answer, she turned the frame around and set it face down on the table, like closing the lid on a coffin. I felt something twist deep inside my chest. "Rachel," I said quietly, "this isn't just a house to me. It's my life." She sighed dramatically. "Exactly, Mrs. Howard. Your life. But Daniel and I are trying to build ours. Don't you think it's fair to give us space?" Space. I wanted to laugh. I had already shrunk myself to fit in the corners of my own home. She left the room before I could reply. Her heels clicked sharply down the hallway, the sound of ownership. That day, I stayed mostly in my room, reading old letters from John, trying not to cry. I told myself she was just stressed, that maybe things would get better if I stayed quiet, patient, kind. But kindness only works on hearts that still know what love is. That evening, Daniel came home early. I heard them whispering in the kitchen, their voices low but tense. Then I heard my name again. When I stepped out, they both fell silent. "What is it?" I asked. Rachel crossed her arms. "We've been thinking. It might be better for everyone if you took a little break. Maybe visit a friend or stay somewhere else for a while." I stared at her. "You want me to leave my house?" "It's our house now," she corrected. "And you could use some rest. You're always saying you miss the old neighborhood. Why not go for a week or two?" Daniel avoided my eyes. I looked straight at him. "Is that what you want too?" He hesitated. "Rachel just thinks—" "Rachel thinks," I interrupted, "and you obey." Silence. Only the clock ticking between us. She smiled tightly. "Don't be dramatic, Mrs. Howard. We're only suggesting it for your own good." "My own good," I repeated softly. "You mean your comfort." That was the first time I saw the irritation flash across her face, real and raw. She wasn't used to me talking back. I think it surprised her that this old woman still had some fire left. She leaned closer, her voice low and venomous. You should have signed those papers when you had the chance. You're only making this harder on yourself. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the air heavy with threat. That night, I couldn't sleep. I packed a small bag, not because I was leaving, but because part of me felt I might have to. My heart was restless, but my pride was stronger. This was my house, the one John and I built brick by brick, year after year, the one where I raised Daniel, where every inch still held his laughter. I whispered to the empty room, they'll have to drag me out. The next morning, Rachel's hostility grew sharper. She stopped cooking entirely, claiming she was too busy. Daniel followed her lead, barely speaking to me. The meals, the warmth, the laughter, all gone. The only sounds were the echo of Rachel's heels and the hum of the fridge. One afternoon, I heard her mutter to a friend on the phone, I can't wait till she's gone. The place will finally feel like mine. I stood behind the half-closed door, clutching the edge of the wall to keep from collapsing. She wants me gone. Completely. I didn't confront her. I just returned to my room, sat on the bed, and cried silently into my shawl. I prayed for John, for strength, for Daniel to remember who he used to be. But the next day, things went too far. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. Rachel was cleaning the floor, humming under her breath. I accidentally spilled a bit of tea near the counter, just a few drops. I bent down with a towel to wipe it, but she snapped before I could speak. Can't you watch what you're doing? She shouted. I'm sorry, I said softly. It was an accident. She glared at me. Of course it was. Everything you do is a mess. Then she lifted the mop from the bucket, water dripping from its end, and pointed it toward me like a weapon. If you're going to live here, she hissed, then act like a guest, or I'll make sure you leave. My heart pounded. For the first time, I saw in her eyes not just anger, but hatred. Cold, burning hatred. I didn't move. I just looked at her and whispered, You'll regret this one day. She laughed, a sharp, cruel laugh that echoed through the house. I doubt it. And that was the moment something inside me broke. For the next 2 days, the house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by cruelty. Every room carried a new echo of humiliation. Rachel didn't need to shout anymore. Her silence did the job well enough. She had started locking the pantry, keeping her expensive groceries separate. She labeled jars, ours and hers. She even took my teacup from the shelf and replaced it with an old chipped one. A reminder, perhaps, of where she thought I belonged. Daniel pretended not to notice. He left early and came home late, eyes always on his phone, as if the glow of that little screen could shield him from the guilt burning around him. But on that Sunday morning, everything fell apart. I woke early, as I always did. The house was quiet, and for a moment, I let myself pretend everything was normal. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, and tea, the way Daniel used to love as a boy. I even set the table for 3, though I knew better. When they came down, Rachel looked at the food and frowned. You don't have to cook anymore, Mrs. Howard. We told you that. I wanted to, I said softly. It's Sunday, family breakfast day. She scoffed. Family, she repeated, as if the word were a bad joke. I turned to Daniel, searching his face for some sign of kindness, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He sat, scrolled on his phone, and muttered, Let's not fight. So I said nothing. But silence, I've learned, can be louder than words. Rachel slammed the plate down, eggs spilling onto the table. You're doing this on purpose, she snapped, trying to make me look bad in front of him. I blinked, stunned. I was only trying to make breakfast. She laughed bitterly. You think I don't know your games? The guilt trips, the sad eyes. It's manipulation, that's what it is. Daniel started to speak, but she silenced him with a glare. Rachel, please, I whispered, my hands trembling. I've done nothing wrong. Oh, you've done plenty wrong, she spat. You've refused to cooperate. You've made our lives miserable. You think this house is yours just because your name is on some paper. It is mine, I said quietly, the words trembling out of me. My husband built it. We paid for every brick with our hands, our sacrifices, our love. You don't understand because you never... That was when it happened. She grabbed the mop from the bucket beside her and raised it, water flinging across the tiles. You old witch! She screamed. Get out! Get out of my house before I lose control! The sound of her voice sliced through me. Daniel stood frozen, didn't stop her, didn't move. I stepped back, my breath shaking. The mop dripped cold water on the floor between us like raindrops on a grave. Rachel, I whispered, put it down. But she didn't. She lunged forward, the mop swinging wildly, splattering dirty water onto my clothes, my face. I stumbled, my back hitting the wall. Do you hear me? She shouted, her voice trembling with fury. Sign those papers or get out. You've ruined our lives long enough. I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman my son had chosen, the woman who had promised to take care of him, to love him, to stand beside him. And now she was standing over me, dripping with anger, chasing me out like a thief. Daniel, I said, my voice breaking, are you just going to stand there? He didn't answer. His lips moved, but no sound came. His eyes were wide, full of shame, maybe fear. Rachel sneered. He won't help you. He knows what's best for us. The words stung worse than the water hitting my skin. I could have screamed, could have fought back. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my shawl from the chair, wrapped it tightly around me, and said softly, You've already taken what's yours, Rachel. I won't give you my dignity, too. Then I walked to the door, barefoot, dripping, trembling. Rachel followed behind, yelling, Don't come back until you learn respect. The door slammed behind me, the echo cutting into the gray morning air. Outside, it was raining again. I stood on the front porch, shivering, my tears mixing with the rain. I didn't even have my purse or my phone, just my shawl, the one John had given me all those years ago. I looked up at the house, my home, and whispered, John, they've taken everything. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. I began to walk, my slippers soaked through, the cold biting my feet. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there anymore. But as I reached the corner of the street, something inside me shifted. The tears stopped, the trembling eased, because for the first time, I realized something painfully clear. They could steal my house, my money, my comfort, but they couldn't steal my story. And one day I swore the world would know the truth. The rain didn't stop for hours. By the time I reached the bus stop, my clothes clung to me, heavy and cold. I sat on the edge of the bench, clutching my shawl tightly, watching the world blur through the curtain of rain. Every drop that hit the pavement sounded like a memory. Every echo like my husband's voice fading farther away. For years, I had given that house everything, my laughter, my cooking, my love. And yet, when I needed shelter, I was left standing outside its door. A kind voice broke through the storm. Ma'am, are you all right? I turned. A young woman with an umbrella was standing beside me, maybe in her 30s, soaked despite her efforts to stay dry. Her eyes were soft, filled with concern. I'm fine, I lied. She looked at me for a moment, then shook her head gently. No, you're not. Come with me. There's a community center nearby. They help women who need a place for a few days. I hesitated. Pride still clung to me like the rain on my clothes. I don't need charity, I murmured. She smiled kindly. It's not charity, it's warmth. And a cup of tea. Something in her voice, maybe the tenderness I'd been starved for, made me follow. The shelter wasn't grand, just a small hall with cots and a faint smell of detergent. But it was clean, safe, and, most importantly, kind. A woman named Mrs. Patel, who ran the place, brought me a towel and a blanket. You rest, she said. We'll talk later. That night, I lay on a simple cot, listening to the rain outside. My heart still ached, but for the first time in days, I didn't feel afraid. The next morning, I told Mrs. Patel my story: the papers, the money, the daughter-in-law, the mop. She listened quietly, nodding, her eyes sometimes glistening with tears. When I finished, she sighed. It's always the same, isn't it? They think age makes us weak. They forget. We're the ones who built the ground they stand on. Her words settled into me like sunlight after a long storm. Over the next few days, I helped around the shelter, folding blankets, serving meals, talking to other women. Some had been abandoned by families, others had escaped worse. Yet every one of them had something I'd lost, a small spark of hope. I began to write in an old notebook Mrs. Patel gave me. Memories, lessons, little pieces of my life. I wrote about love, loss, betrayal, and the way silence can sometimes scream louder than words. Each night, more women would gather around, listening as I read aloud. My voice trembled at first, but slowly it grew steadier. One evening, after I finished reading, the young woman who had helped me at the bus stop, her name was Maya, said softly, "You should share your story with the world. People need to hear it." I smiled faintly. Who would want to listen to an old woman's pain? Maya shook her head. You'd be surprised. Sometimes the truth is what people crave most. A week passed. I felt lighter, even without my home, my belongings, my son. I had found something else, dignity that no one could sign away. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Patel came to me, holding a newspaper. Look, she said, pointing to the headline. My heart skipped as I read, Local businessman under investigation for fraudulent property transfers. The name beneath it, Daniel Howard. My son. I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. The article said authorities had begun reviewing irregularities in several accounts linked to his company, transactions under his wife's name. It mentioned possible misappropriation of assets and forged authorizations. Rachel had finally gone too far. Mrs. Patel placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you all right? I stared at the page, tears blurring the ink. I warned them, I whispered. Greed always takes more than it gives. 2 days later, I received a letter, delivered by hand. No name, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a note written in Daniel's shaky handwriting. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know what she was doing. I thought I could fix it before it went too far. I've lost everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but please know, I never stopped loving you. Daniel. I read it over and over, tears dripping onto the page. He had lost everything, the money, the house, maybe even his marriage. But perhaps, in losing it all, he had finally found the truth. That night, I sat outside the shelter, under a sky full of stars. I thought of John, of Daniel as a little boy, of all the mornings I had spent making tea in that warm kitchen. I whispered into the night. You were right, John. Love built that house, not money. And love, real love, can't be taken. Maya sat beside me, smiling softly. What will you do now? I looked up at the stars, the same ones that had watched over me all my life. I'll start again, I said. Maybe smaller, maybe humbler, but it will be mine. And this time, I'll fill it only with people who know what kindness means. Months passed. The world didn't stop when I lost everything. It simply went on, asking me to walk along with it. And slowly I did. The shelter became my new beginning. I started teaching other women there how to read and write. Small lessons in English, letters, and sometimes just lessons about courage. I used to believe my life had ended the day Rachel raised that mop against me. But maybe that was the day I was reborn. One evening, Maya came to me again, her phone in hand and excitement in her eyes. "Remember when I told you people needed to hear your story?" she said. "Yes," I smiled faintly. "You never stopped reminding me." "Well," she grinned, "I started a little blog. I posted the first part of your story there, the day you refused to sign those papers. It's gone viral." I blinked, startled. "Viral? You mean people actually read it?" "Thousands," she said softly. "They cried. They shared. They said it reminded them of their own mothers and grandmothers. You've touched hearts, Mrs. Howard." I didn't know what to say. For years, my voice had been drowned out, silenced by pride, by fear, by those who believed age made me invisible. Now, strangers were listening. The next week, a local journalist came to interview me for a short video. He asked gentle questions about love, betrayal, forgiveness. I told him everything, not with bitterness, but with truth. I said, "Greed is a kind of hunger that never ends. But love feeds even the poorest soul." When the video was published, it spread far and wide. People sent letters, comments, messages from around the world. Daughters, sons, widows, and mothers, all sharing their own stories of loss and strength and starting over. One message stood out. It was from Daniel. "Mom, I saw your story. I cried the whole time. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I left Rachel. She's facing charges for fraud. I'm working again, starting from nothing. Maybe one day I'll be worthy to see you again." I read the message twice, my heart aching with both sorrow and pride. I whispered to myself, maybe losing everything was the only way for him to learn what truly matters. Weeks later, Daniel came to visit the shelter. When I saw him standing in the doorway, thinner, humbler, his eyes full of regret, I didn't see the man who betrayed me. I saw the boy I once carried in my arms, the child who used to bring me flowers from the garden. He knelt before me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." I touched his face and said softly, "You're my son. I never stopped praying you'd find your way back." We sat together for hours, no shouting, no blame, just the quiet mending of a bond that time had almost destroyed. After he left, Mrs. Patel smiled and said, "See? Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts, it comes from life itself." She was right. Rachel lost everything, the wealth, the house, the power she had worshipped. And I found peace, freedom, and a family of women who taught me that broken things can still shine. I moved into a small apartment near the shelter. Nothing grand, but it had sunlight, warmth, and quiet. Every morning, I made tea, opened the window, and felt the air of a life that finally belonged to me again. One evening, as I sat writing my story for the final time, I realized something. When Rachel chased me out that day, she thought she was taking away my power. But what she really did was give it back. Because that day, I stopped being afraid. Now I write not to remember the pain, but to remind others that no one can steal your worth, not even the ones you love. I called my story The Day She Raised the Mop. It was posted online, turned into a short film, and reached people I'd never met. And every time someone wrote to me saying, "You helped me leave a cruel home," I felt John's presence beside me, smiling. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But I know this. I may have lost $5 million, but I found something priceless. Myself. So to anyone watching or reading this, if your kindness is taken for weakness, remember, silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes it's just the sound of strength growing quietly inside you.